I still remember the smell of expensive perfume that filled the conference hall that day, the kind that announces wealth before the person even enters the room. It was the annual Miller Industries Leadership Conference, where the elite gathered to network, where careers were made and broken, and where I found myself standing against the wall, clutching my glass of champagne like a shield. My husband James had insisted I come. "It's important for appearances," he'd said while adjusting his designer tie that morning. "Everyone brings their spouses." What he didn't say was that I'd be the only spouse there who wasn't part of their exclusive circle. I was the outsider, the woman who worked as a kindergarten teacher before marrying into the Miller family, the woman who supposedly got lucky and married the youngest executive. "Oh, look who decided to grace us with her presence," came the familiar, honey-coated voice that always managed to cut like a knife. Rebecca Miller, my sister-in-law, James's older sister, and the current CFO of Miller Industries. Her perfectly styled blonde hair bounced as she air-kissed me, not even trying to hide her disdain. "Rebecca," I nodded politely. "Congratulations on organizing another successful event." "Well, someone has to maintain the family standards," she replied with a pointed look at my dress, a simple black number I'd splurged on specifically for this event. It had cost me a month's worth of my personal savings, but next to her couture gown, it might as well have been from a discount store. I took a deep breath. 3 years of marriage to James, 3 years of Rebecca's constant belittling, of being treated like an intruder who'd somehow tricked her precious brother into marriage. 3 years of smiling through the pain. "James mentioned you're giving the keynote address tonight," I said, trying to change the subject. Rebecca's face lit up with pride. "Yes. Father finally recognized that I should be the face of Miller Industries. After all, I've only dedicated my entire life to this company." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Unlike some people who just married into success. Before I could respond, she was whisked away by a group of executives, leaving me alone again. I spotted James across the room, deep in conversation with his father and several board members. He caught my eye briefly, but quickly looked away, clearly too busy for his wife. I sighed, finding a quiet corner to observe the room. That's when I noticed something strange. The conference room's layout had been changed last minute, with a small side door now visible from where I stood. A door that led to Rebecca's private office in this building. What caught my attention was watching the company's IT director, Marcus, slipping out of that office, looking nervously around before joining the crowd. Minutes later, Rebecca emerged from the same door, adjusting her jewelry, her lipstick slightly smudged. I wouldn't have thought much of it, except this wasn't the first time I'd noticed something off between them. At the Christmas party last year, I'd accidentally walked into a storage room to find them standing suspiciously close, jumping apart when I entered. My phone buzzed with a text from James. "Rebecca's speech starts in 10. Where are you?" I made my way to the main conference hall where rows of chairs had been arranged facing a podium. I slipped into a seat in the back just as Rebecca took the stage to thunderous applause. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she began, her voice commanding attention. "Miller Industries stands for excellence, integrity, and family values." I nearly choked on my champagne at that last part. Rebecca continued, "As we move forward with our expansion plans, I want to emphasize how important it is that we maintain the Miller standard in everything we do." Her eyes found me in the crowd, a smirk playing on her lips. Not everyone understands what it means to uphold a legacy. Some people think they can just walk in and enjoy the fruits of generations of hard work. Whispers and glances turned my way. My cheeks burned as I realized she was talking about me, humiliating me in front of hundreds of people. James, seated in the front row, stared straight ahead, not even turning to defend me. It takes a special kind of person to truly be part of the Miller family, Rebecca continued. Someone who contributes, who sacrifices, who upholds our values in everything they do. That's when something inside me snapped. 3 years of enduring her subtle jabs, of trying to prove myself worthy, of watching James sit silently as his sister tore me down. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small notebook. During my lonely moments at these corporate events, I developed a habit of observing, of taking notes. Things I'd seen, conversations I'd overheard, including what I'd witnessed between Rebecca and Marcus over the past year. I quickly scribbled a note, folded it, and walked straight up to the stage, while Rebecca was mid-sentence about family loyalty. The audience gasped at my boldness, but I kept my composure, a serene smile on my face. "What are you doing?" Rebecca hissed as I approached. I handed her the folded paper. "Just a small reminder about family values," I whispered. Rebecca unfolded the note, her eyes scanning the 3 lines I'd written. "I know about you and Marcus. I have dates, times, and the photos from his office camera. Your father is sitting in the front row." Her face went completely pale. The microphone captured her sharp intake of breath as she froze mid-speech, the paper trembling in her hands. The silence in the conference hall was deafening. Rebecca stood frozen at the podium, the color drained from her face, her perfectly manicured fingers crushing my note. The crowd leaned forward in their seats, confused by the sudden interruption in her speech. "Rebecca!" her father called from the front row. "Is everything all right?" I maintained my calm smile as I returned to my seat, feeling hundreds of eyes following me. For once, I didn't shrink under their gaze. For once, I wasn't the outsider being judged. I was the one holding the cards. Rebecca cleared her throat, attempting to regain her composure. Yes, Father. Just a small reminder from my sister-in-law." Her voice had lost its authoritative edge, now wavering slightly. Where was I? Yes, family values. But the damage was done. She stumbled through the rest of her speech, losing her train of thought multiple times, her eyes constantly darting between her father and Marcus, who had gone noticeably rigid in his chair across the hall. When she finally finished and left the stage to considerably less enthusiastic applause, I felt a hand grip my arm. It was James, his face a mixture of confusion and anger. "What did you do?" he whispered harshly, pulling me toward a quiet corner. "I simply gave your sister a note," I replied calmly. "A note that made her nearly collapse on stage. What could you possibly have written?" I looked him straight in the eyes. "The truth, James. Something this family seems allergic to." Before he could respond, we were interrupted by his father, William Miller Sr., the patriarch of both the family and the company. His imposing figure approached us, his expression unreadable. "James, your wife seems to have quite an effect on your sister," he said, his eyes studying me with new interest. "I've never seen Rebecca lose her composure like that in public." James stammered, "Father, I apologize for any disruption." "No need," William waved him off, surprising us both. Rebecca's speech was becoming rather self-congratulatory anyway. He turned to me directly. "I'd like a word with you in private." James looked panicked as his father led me away toward his executive office. My heart pounded in my chest. Had I gone too far? Would this be the end of my marriage? But something inside me refused to regret standing up for myself after years of silent endurance. William's office was imposing, dark wood, leather chairs, and walls lined with awards and photographs of 3 generations of Millers, none of which included me, I noticed. "Please sit," he gestured to a chair as he closed the door behind us. I sat, back straight, hands folded in my lap, preparing for the worst. "What exactly did you write in that note to Rebecca?" he asked directly. I took a deep breath. "With all due respect, sir, that was between Rebecca and me." William's eyebrows rose slightly, impressed by my refusal to be intimidated. I see. He studied me for a moment before continuing. You know, for 3 years I've watched you at these functions, always polite, always trying to fit in, always enduring whatever Rebecca threw your way. I remained silent, surprised by his observation. Most people in this company think you're just a teacher who got lucky marrying my son, he continued. But teachers observe, don't they? They see patterns others miss. Yes, they do, I agreed cautiously. William leaned forward. Rebecca has been pushing for me to name her as my successor for years. Tonight's speech was essentially her audition. But I've been hesitating. I couldn't hide my surprise. Rebecca had always presented herself as the undisputed heir to the company. What you did tonight, William continued, took courage and strategic thinking. You waited for the perfect moment, when she was most vulnerable, in front of everyone who matters in this company. And whatever you wrote in that note clearly hit its mark perfectly. I wasn't sure how to respond. Was he angry? Impressed? Sir, I didn't do it to undermine the company. No, he interrupted. You did it because after 3 years of being treated like an outsider, you finally stood up for yourself. And you did it without causing a scene, without lowering yourself to Rebecca's level of public humiliation. William stood up and walked to the window overlooking the city lights. This company doesn't need another yes man or someone who puts personal vendettas above business. It needs someone who observes before acting, who knows when to strike, and who understands the power of information. He turned back to me. The board meeting next week was supposed to be where I announced Rebecca as the future CEO of Miller Industries. Now, I'm not so sure that's the right decision. My mouth went dry. Sir, I never intended... No, I'm sure you didn't. He smiled slightly. But intentions aside, you've demonstrated something tonight that I haven't seen from my own children. The ability to wait patiently, observe carefully, and act decisively when the moment is right. There was a knock at the door, and James entered, his face tense with worry. Father, the board members are asking for you, he said, shooting me a concerned glance. James, William said, your wife and I were just having an illuminating conversation about the future of Miller Industries. Lord James looked confused. The future? Yes, William nodded. I believe I've been looking in the wrong direction for leadership. Sometimes the most valuable assets are the ones we overlook. As we left the office, I caught sight of Rebecca across the hall, her eyes wide with fear as she watched me emerge from her father's office. For the first time since I'd married into the Miller family, she looked at me not with disdain, but with genuine fear. And as for the note, those 3 lines weren't just about what I'd seen between her and Marcus. The truth was, I'd been gathering information about questionable decisions she'd made as CFO for months. Decisions that prioritized her advancement over the company's well-being. Tonight was just the beginning of her reckoning. The week following the conference was unlike anything I'd experienced in my 3 years as a Miller. Suddenly, people who had previously looked through me were making eye contact, offering respectful nods in the hallways of Miller Industries headquarters. I'd taken a week off from my teaching job at James's insistence, or rather, at his father's request. I need you here, William had said simply, handing me a visitor's badge that granted me access to the executive floor. Not a permanent employee badge, but something that felt dangerously close to acceptance. Rebecca had called in sick for 3 days straight after the conference. When she finally returned, she avoided me completely, taking alternate routes when she saw me coming. The office rumor mill was working overtime, with whispers following me everywhere. What had I written in that note? What did William Miller Sr. see in the kindergarten teacher? James was equally bewildered by the turn of events. What exactly did my father say to you? He asked for the dozenth time as we drove to the office on Thursday morning. He said he appreciated my observational skills, I replied truthfully, though I left out William's comments about leadership and the future of the company. Something told me to keep that close to my chest for now. That's it. That doesn't explain why he's suddenly including you in executive meetings. I shrugged, enjoying, perhaps for the first time, being the one with information James wasn't privy to. When we arrived at the office, William's assistant was waiting for me. "Mr. Miller would like to see you in the conference room," she said, pointedly addressing me rather than James. James frowned. "What about me?" "You have calls to return," the assistant replied matter-of-factly. "Your father specifically asked for your wife." The conference room was filled with the most senior executives of Miller Industries when I walked in. William sat at the head of the table, and beside him was an empty chair. "Ah, there she is," William announced, standing up. "Gentlemen, I believe you all know my daughter-in-law, though perhaps not as well as you should." He gestured to the empty seat beside him, a position of honor that would typically have been occupied by Rebecca. The executives exchanged glances as I took my seat, my heart racing beneath my calm exterior. "For those wondering about this unusual arrangement," William continued, "let me be clear. Over the past week, some concerning information has come to light regarding our financial operations, information that was brought to my attention thanks to the keen observations of my daughter-in-law." My stomach dropped. I hadn't actually shared any of my observations about Rebecca's questionable financial decisions yet. Was William bluffing? Testing me? "Sir," I began carefully, "I haven't formally presented any—" William raised a hand to silence me, a knowing look in his eyes. "No need for modesty. Your note to Rebecca was just the tip of the iceberg, wasn't it? You've been connecting dots for months." I realized he was giving me an opening, a chance to confirm his suspicions without revealing that I hadn't actually shared anything concrete yet. It was a test, but also an opportunity. "I've observed some patterns that raised questions," I said carefully, meeting his gaze. I was waiting for the right moment to bring them forward. William smiled, satisfied. "And that's precisely why we're here today. In preparation for next week's board meeting, I've asked our external auditors to conduct a thorough review of certain financial decisions made over the past 18 months. The room erupted in murmurs. An external audit was serious and unusual for a company that prided itself on handling matters internally. "This isn't a witch hunt," William assured the group. "It's due diligence, and to ensure complete transparency, I've asked my daughter-in-law to assist the auditors, given her unique perspective." One of the older executives cleared his throat. "With all due respect, William, what qualifies Mrs. Miller for this role? She's a kindergarten teacher, not a financial analyst." William's smile didn't waver. "Sometimes the most valuable insights come from outside our bubble, Richard. Besides, she has a master's in education with a focus on behavioral patterns. She observes for a living." He turned to me. "Isn't that right?" I nodded, surprised he knew that detail about my background. "Yes. In education, we're trained to notice when things don't follow expected patterns." "Exactly," William said triumphantly. "And patterns are exactly what we're looking for." As the meeting progressed, I realized what William was doing. He was positioning me as someone who had already uncovered financial irregularities, creating a narrative that would make Rebecca's eventual exposure seem like the result of my diligent investigation rather than a personal vendetta. He was giving me credibility before I'd even had a chance to prove myself. After the meeting, William asked me to stay behind. "That went well," he said, gathering his papers. "The audit begins tomorrow. I've arranged for you to have access to everything you need." "Sir," I ventured cautiously, "may I ask why you're doing this? Putting your trust in me this way?" William looked at me thoughtfully. "Did you know that before I married James's mother, I was just an accountant at a rival firm? The Millers didn't think I was good enough for their daughter either. I blinked in surprise. This wasn't part of the Miller family mythology. Rebecca has been so focused on being a Miller by blood that she's forgotten what built this company wasn't just the name. It was outsider perspective and fresh eyes. He patted my shoulder. You reminded me of that at the conference. As I left the conference room, I nearly collided with Rebecca, who had clearly been waiting to ambush me. Her eyes were rimmed with red, her normally perfect appearance slightly disheveled. "What did you tell him?" she hissed, grabbing my arm and pulling me into an empty office. "What exactly do you think you know?" I maintained my composure, channeling the newfound confidence William had instilled in me. "I know enough, Rebecca. About Marcus, about the financial decisions, about how you've been positioning yourself at the expense of the company." Her face contorted with rage and fear. "You're nothing but a kindergarten teacher who got lucky. You think you can just walk in here and destroy what I've worked my entire life for?" "No," I replied calmly. "You did that yourself when you decided that being a Miller meant you could break the rules." I moved toward the door, then paused. "By the way, the audit starts tomorrow." Her face went pale again. "Audit? What audit?" "The external audit your father ordered, of all financial decisions made in the past 18 months. I smiled serenely. "I'll be assisting the auditors." Late, I left her standing there, mouth agape, as I walked back to the office William had temporarily assigned me. Through the glass walls, I could see James watching from his office across the hall, his expression a mixture of confusion and something else I couldn't quite identify. Pride? Fear? Perhaps both. My phone buzzed with a text from William. "Dinner tonight, my house. Bring James. Time to discuss the future." As I looked at my reflection in the glass walls of my temporary office, I hardly recognized myself. Gone was the insecure outsider, desperately trying to fit in. In her place stood someone new, someone who had finally found her voice in the most unexpected of places. William Miller Sr.'s estate stood majestically on a hilltop overlooking the city. As our car wound up the private driveway, James adjusted his tie nervously. "I still don't understand what's happening," he said. "That note at the conference, then the meetings, now this audit, and dinner with father at his home. He never does business dinners at home." I squeezed his hand. "Maybe it's not about business." James gave me a skeptical look. "With my father, it's always about business." We were surprised to find not the formal dining room prepared, but the intimate breakfast nook with just 3 place settings. "No, Rebecca?" James asked as his father greeted us. "Your sister is indisposed," William replied cryptically. "She said she needed to work late." I suspected Rebecca was frantically covering her tracks before tomorrow's audit, but William said nothing more as he poured our wine. "To new beginnings," he toasted, his eyes meeting mine. Dinner was surprisingly pleasant, with William sharing stories about the early days of Miller Industries, stories I'd never heard before. "The company was nearly bankrupt when my father-in-law handed me the reins," he revealed, to James's visible shock. "The board wanted to sell, but I convinced them to try something radical." "I never knew that," James admitted. William smiled sadly. "There's a lot about our family history that's been sanitized over the years. Rebecca particularly enjoys the mythologized version, where the Millers have always been infallible." After dinner, William invited us into his study, a room I'd never been permitted to enter before. Unlike his corporate office, this space was warmer, filled with family photographs. He picked up a framed photo from his desk. "Did you know I have this?" he asked, turning it toward me. It was a photograph from the Children's Hospital charity event last year, me surrounded by my kindergarten students who had made cards for the young patients. "You organized that entire event," William continued. Got your students involved, coordinated with the hospital, even convinced our marketing team to double the donation without taking any credit. James looked surprised. You never told me you were behind that. It wasn't about recognition, I said quietly. Exactly, William nodded. While Rebecca was ensuring her name was on the press release, you were actually doing the work. That's when I first started paying attention to you. You. He poured 3 glasses of brandy before settling into his leather chair. Tomorrow's audit will reveal what I already suspect, William said. Rebecca has been making decisions that serve her ambitions rather than the company's interests. Decisions that could have damaged Miller Industries. James leaned forward. Father, if Rebecca has done something wrong, she'll face consequences, William stated firmly. But that's not why I asked you here. He turned to me. I want to offer you a position. I nearly choked on my brandy. Sir? Not as CEO, he clarified with a small smile, but as Chief Ethics Officer, reporting directly to me and the board. Someone who can observe, assess, and ensure we're making decisions that align with our true values. James stared in disbelief. You want to hire my wife? Unless she'd rather continue teaching kindergarten, William replied, though I think her talents might be wasted there. I set my glass down carefully. I'm honored, but I don't have a business background. No, but you have something more valuable, perspective and integrity. William leaned forward. Miller Industries doesn't need another yes man or another ambitious executive willing to cut corners. It needs someone who sees things differently. The offer was tempting, but I hesitated. What about Rebecca? Rebecca will remain as CFO, but with restricted authorities pending the audit results. She'll report to a new committee, which you would chair. I would effectively become Rebecca's superior, a complete reversal of our power dynamic. That seems vindictive, I said carefully. William looked surprised, then laughed genuinely. Most people would jump at the chance to put Rebecca in her place. I don't want revenge, I said honestly. I just wanted respect. William studied me, then nodded. And that's precisely why you're right for this role. You don't want power for its own sake. He stood and gazed out at the city lights. I built this company on more than just profit margins. Rebecca sees Miller Industries as her birthright, but she doesn't understand what makes it truly valuable. Take the weekend to consider my offer, he concluded. The position comes with full benefits and an executive-level salary, significantly more than teaching, I imagine. Driving home, James was uncharacteristically quiet. You're not happy about this, I observed. He gripped the steering wheel tightly. I don't know what I am. In 1 week, everything's changed. My sister's apparently been making questionable decisions. My father's creating a position for my wife, and you... He glanced at me. You're suddenly someone different. I'm not different, I said gently. I've always been this person. I just finally stopped hiding her. James pulled into our driveway. All these years I thought I was protecting you from company politics. But you were watching everything, weren't you? Seeing things even I missed. Teachers are trained observers, I reminded him with a smile. Would you take it? The position? I considered carefully. I think I would. Not to oversee Rebecca or prove anything, but because I believe I could make a difference. James took my hand. For the first time since joining the company, I'm actually excited about its future. Because of you. The next morning, William called early. The auditors found something, he said. Rebecca tried to delete files last night, but IT recovered everything. She's been called in for questioning. I felt a mixture of vindication and sadness. What happens now? That depends on you, William replied. The board meets at noon. I need to know if you're accepting the position. I heard the subtle vulnerability in his voice. The powerful William Miller Sr. actually concerned I might refuse. I'll be there, I said firmly. But I have one condition. Name it. Rebecca stays with the company, though demoted as necessary. This isn't about destroying her. It's about rebuilding something better. There was a pause, then a soft chuckle. You continue to surprise me. Agreed. As I hung up, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back wasn't just James Miller's wife anymore, or the kindergarten teacher who married above her station. She was someone who had found her voice and her place in the Miller family, not by trying to fit in, but by standing out. The note I'd slipped to Rebecca had changed everything. But the real power hadn't been in what I'd written. It had been in finally having the courage to write it at all.